Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today, we are wrapping up Manifest Destiny with volumes 7 and 8. My gosh, I was trying to remember the titles, and the Latin is just above my pay grade. I'm assuming this is back to Talpa Lumbricus and Lepus, and then Sacrificium and Redditus. Yeah. Man, the vocabulary in this book, really just in the titles. It's not so lofty interior, not in a negative way. It's not rudimentary or anything. It's just they really went all out for the titles, and it's fun decrypting.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a parallel there, right? The idea that of this having the veneer of a scholarly work in terms of what they were doing at the time, right?
It's probably what his journals are called, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we are classifying what we see and encounter out there, and so they would, someone like Lewis would definitely be doing it in a traditional Latin sense, because that's how you classify things. Just in this story, they happen to be giant beasts of like kaiju size and stuff, not just like bison and buffalo and birds or swans and things like that. We're talking about beings from another place. So no, I think it's a fun. It was a fun kind of naming convention, which I enjoyed going through, and I like having arcs named like that. I like when creators put that little bit of extra effort in, just to show what they're thinking about what the story is and what their arcs are. They see them more than just breaks, but they see them as like actual, I was going to say episodes. I'm probably thinking that because of Chris Dingess and his television background, but you know what I'm saying? Like they think of them as completed arcs and kind of giving them titles and names in that way kind of reinforces that idea.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of that. To me, the next level is when each individual issue has a title. Yeah. Not necessary, but always appreciated when it happens. But the trades, it really helps.
It does.
So, I mean, do you want to start at the end, or should we build our way there?
I'm good starting wherever. I think ultimately the build up. I mean, really at this point, we coming at the end. The build up towards the end is really just kind of slowly bringing everybody up to speed as to what the true mission is.
Yeah.
It's just like little by little, the idea that Lewis Clark and Sacagawea, they all understand why they're here, the real reason why they're here, even though they understand the global mission, which is we got to sacrifice a war child, right? A child of two worlds,
right?
To this demon. Are we saying Navith?
Oh, I would say Navith.
Okay, what's up?
That was one of those in my head words that I didn't even bother thinking through how to pronounce, and I've been stung a few times.
You just see it and that's the demon. But we got to sacrifice a war child, and in doing so, the person that does the sacrifice is granted like a wish or a boon of some sort. And so both Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea want to do this, but of course they want to be the one. What they haven't told the other party is that they want to be the one to do it because they want their wish to be the one that is granted. Lewis and Clark obviously want that for what they see as the glory of the United States, which is what their mission was from Jefferson. And Sacagawea obviously would want to do that to rid the land of
at the very least protect the land they currently have, stop the expansion, possibly drive them out entirely.
Yeah, but regardless of the specifics, it is the explicit opposite of what Lewis and Clark want, But for the time until they get there, until they actually reach the Pacific Ocean, they're all on the same page, and we see and they slowly bring more and more people in up until the point where after the core discovery is down to like 5 people, not named Lewis and Clark and Sacagawea. when the group is down to like just literally a handful of people left, that's when there's like full disclosure of this is what we're doing, this is what it is.
That's why everyone died.
Yeah, well, yeah, because after they go through kind of the final trials and deaths of the group, kind of when they're standing there, I believe it's when they're standing there in front of the altar, looking on the Pacific, when I think it's Clark who's like, "We're done. You guys can go. If you make it back to Washington and you see Secretary so and so, he will give you, whatever, the promised reward. But like, you make it back on your own. Good luck to you guys. Mission's over, But like, but that comes after, again, full disclosure. This is what we're doing. This is why we're here. We're here to kill this baby. This is why we came all this way. This is what this is for. And everyone gets dismissed. Then Jensen obviously makes a return for one last kind of bit there, but it's all just preamble to get to this end moment right here, right? When the idea of like the reality of having to sacrifice this baby, this toddler, starts setting in on everyone, and you see how it weighs differently on each person. Which I think was which I enjoyed seeing that it wasn't just like, it wasn't so black and white, that they Dingess and Roberts, I think, did a good job of creating a plausible and believable kind of spectrum of reactions.
Yeah, I mean, so we as the reader know going into 7, like, you can't get attached to this baby. And that's the very first thing we see happening, right? Is like everyone's bonding with the baby.
Oh, you mean? I'm sorry.
We the reader know. Yes, we the reader
know that the characters shouldn't do that. Yeah.
Right.
But we the reader should know that the baby can't actually die, because again, he has historical plot armor.
Yes, although they never did. Well, maybe I missed it, but they never did explain why they shifted the birthday by a few months, right?
They did not. And yeah, that never came up. And something we speculated last week. I imagine at that point it was probably just, maybe they stopped caring in terms of like, we've deviated so far from the known historical record that maybe it didn't matter. But yeah, in general, though.
Well, that, and I wondered if they had written themselves like a couple possible endings, and the birth date would have mattered for one, like you were saying, like, a death and rebirth type thing that, erased 2 months worth of time. And it was like as simple as just called this a birthday.
Maybe, but I doubt they had contingency plans. I think that seems like there's no reason to do that other than just to tell your story. Like, there's no reason to have other ways out. Like, tell your story and go with it. But I mean, it became clear to me, though, like reading through it, of just like, and I would say the one nitpick I have with how the story ended is a nitpick that I almost feel bad for having, because I don't see how they could have gotten out of it. Which is the reveal of Collins, and like the idea that he was a war child. He was one of these beings that the demon needed. And on one hand, it's like, well, if you hide that all the way to the end and drop it at the end,
yeah,
it feels like, well, that wasn't earned. What are we doing? That feels like the laziest kind of Deus Ex Machina. But then the flip side is you do what they did here and you seed it early. So it makes sense when you're at the final confrontation there. But once you do that, I think a savvy reader is like, oh, well, Colin's going to die now.
Right.
Because again, we know that Jean-Baptiste can't die because he lives. And so that's kind of a catch-22, I think, for Dingess and Roberts there. And again, it's a nitpick, but again, I don't see another way out of that. And I think they chose the better option because, and what redeems it for me is going into it now, at least for me, going in, leading up to this final confrontation, and especially after like the whole fracas when they're there, and like York takes Jean Baptiste and runs off, and everyone runs away because they're trying to find the baby, and Collins is standing there, and it's obvious that he's going to sacrifice himself. What I like that they kind of kept not so much hidden, but the reveal wasn't so much that he was the one that was going to die. The reveal was what his wish was going to be, because I said that was part of the deal, right? Is the person that kills, that makes the sacrifice, gets some sort of wish. And so the idea that he would wish for nothing other than like clearing these monsters out of here, which then it starts, it begins the book's dovetail into realigning itself with history.
Exactly. Like this is now like a mythology that
what is,
could have happened.
What is,
like who can disprove it?
Yeah.
Because all the evidence of any of this stuff, it's gone.
Exactly. And the thing that Navath says there is like, I'll rid these beasts, but the war between your people, that's still going on. Like you're still going to fight each other. You're still going to slaughter each other. Me and my cohort, my monsters will be out of here, but the war isn't over. The war isn't claimed, which when you look at history, like, yeah, nothing was solved by this. We didn't gain anything out of it.
Hey, you got a map.
Exactly. And a map that is, and even in this parallel universe, right? All of the notes and the maps that Lewis and Clark would have had in their secret journal now become moot because all the monsters are gone now. Well, right. Effectively, right? So everything they documented,
aside from them being the monsters now,
but said all the things all the creatures they documented aren't there anymore, and so you return back, and what you have is you have a pathway to the west now, and you have the documentation of all the quote unquote regular creatures and end beasts that they encountered, which is what we're left with in history. So I liked how that dovetailed there. So again, to me that helped redeem the Collins bit a little bit. Again, it still felt like a lose-lose situation for them in terms of, well, we have to introduce something so it doesn't feel like we're saving the baby out of nowhere. But once you introduce something, then it becomes obvious what they're doing. So yeah, I thought it was no win for them, but ultimately because of what happened afterwards, of how the story wrapped up and again realigned itself with history, that helped kind of allay my nits a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. Collins is the character that, he came into focus only in the back half of these trades. Mm-hmm. It makes sense, like why he wasn't a huge character in the Scooby-Doo adventures. Yeah. Of 1 and 2 and 3. Well,
it starts in 3 though, because 3 is with the
the blue guys. But that's when we really see him.
But that's like his introduction, pretty much. That's like pretty much his introduction.
Right. That's his introduction. And you get like the brief history of everyone getting his name wrong. You learn he has a military history and that he was dishonorably discharged and yada, yada, yada. But you don't see, all the war child history and stuff like that, because that presumably existed in their minds, but there was no point in sharing it at that point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess. Well, so what you do show is that he talks about having he was an orphan,
right?
So the idea is that he doesn't know his parents. So I guess there is a way where they could have introduced in like volume 3 that he had heritage of he had indigenous heritage and kind of white heritage. It would have been interesting if they had dropped that then in volume 3. And then not mention it again until volume 8, when Lewis and Clark come clean about what we have, about what sacrifice we're making, and have everyone be like, "That's crazy," and for Collins and hopefully the reader be like, "Oh, remember that thing from 25 issues ago?"
Right.
Like that sort of like that's maybe the one way it could have like long gamed out. Where then it may feel like a surprise in the moment if you don't remember, But if you go back and read it, you see, oh no, they seeded that thing way back in like issue, the would have been like 15 or something like that, So there maybe could have been a way around that. But again, in the end, I think they had to think of something, right? Again, it
Right.
had to be something there because you can't have Jean-Baptiste die.
Yeah. But getting to Collins in volume 7 here, I felt awful for him.
Oh yeah,
Because
that's both an incredible and like heartbreaking moment with the I guess we'll call them like worm creatures.
little pink guys that go squee,
Yeah,
like really loud
the
at
worm
every
creatures.
page.
Yeah,
That are
yeah,
calling for their mom, and they laid the groundwork for it in the pages that lead up to it. Like everybody's kind of softening up around the baby, except Collins.
yeah,
Collins is like, no, I did what we've done at every stop so far, which is like you discover it, we wipe it out.
yeah.
Sorry, I saved us a couple days from you synthesizing milk. Like all of the weird side quests you decided to go on because you're feeling bad. Either you feel bad directly because we have a baby around us and these are babies, or you feel bad because you can see how it's impacting Sacagawea and you know her emotional state right now, having a small child with her. But I'm like, what he did was absolutely in line with everything they had done at every stop on the way. There's literally no reason to question his decision within the context of this story. And so for them to come down on him so arbitrarily and harsh.
What I would say though, this is the military thing of like,
right. I was thinking of A Few Good Men.
Well, no. So I was thinking of Band of Brothers, which is the idea of like,
oh, sure.
You're not getting yelled at because of what you did. You're getting yelled at because you didn't listen to me, know? Yeah. And it is immaterial. If you know what my order was going to be, your job is to wait for the order. Your job is to not act unilaterally. And so I think there is a part of the indignation of Lewis and Clark who I got the sense that they were genuinely trying to help. Like they would have tried to help these creatures the way the Sacagawea had offered up. But the indignation really was like, you can't act. We can't have people acting on their own, And so, yeah, but you're absolutely right. From a moral and or ethical standpoint, they've got no ground to stand on. Their only kind of recourse is the idea that like there's a chain of command, and if we're not following the chain of command, then like what are we doing here? And like that's pretty shaky ground given all the acts they've already done.
Well, that and it's like, I mean, who is Collins? Dishonorable discharge.
Yeah.
Who is the rest of your crew? Criminals.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I'm not sure it's realistic to hold them to the standards of like the Marine Corps in terms of their code of conduct.
But again,
especially when you're doing it seemingly arbitrarily.
But they had been doing that up into it.
I guess they whipped someone for stealing rum in the first volume.
And for desertion and things like that, like there is punishment happening. And there is at least an understanding that this is a military operation, even if they have civilians, even if those civilians are like convicted felons of kind of various severity. They're still under military lead. So, I'm not saying Lewis and Clark were right for this. They're absolutely not. But that indignation is because they know, I think because they know they don't have the moral and ethical ground to chastise Collins, right? Yes. Because they know. So the only thing they can do is be like, is come down on him in the chain of command sense, and it is because then it makes Collins' argument, which is completely rational and probably true, the idea of like, I just did the thing you were going to tell us to do anyway, eventually,
Yeah. So I think I'm reading it like a civilian, and I think, but that's what I thought of with A Few Good Men while I was reading it, because, even though Tom Cruise's character is military, he's like, military legal team based out of DC, orders are kind of suggestions.
Yeah.
you know, and when he has all of his back and forth with the Jack Nicholson character, Jack Nicholson's like, no, an order's an order.
Yeah.
And you know, even if you, when you go to the West Wing, there's the whole
Yeah.
like you disobeyed an immoral order
Yeah.
not to sleep with someone or something, and there was this big uh Vicky something. Anyway,
Vicky Hilton.
Vicky Hilton, man,
Yeah.
I
As
knew
a
you
fighter
would know.
pilot. Yeah.
The fighter pilot, right? And when Fitzwallace comes in the room, he's like, "I think she should be dishonorably discharged," and I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen because, like, you don't get to choose which orders matter and which ones don't. You follow orders or you don't.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, and like, and the way like Josh Lyman felt squeamish about that, and he was like, "Yep, I know you do. Like that, it's going to feel wrong to you because you don't live this lifestyle."
Yeah.
So anyway, I was feeling that where
Well, which is understandable. And again, it's not saying, and again, I'm not using that to say that Lewis and Clark are right about it, but it is that is
100%,
their
yeah.
that is their mindset of just like it doesn't matter what you did in this case, even though what happened was specifically horrific. In that point, it doesn't matter. The point was like, we didn't tell you to do that. So it doesn't matter if we were going to tell you to do that. You can't just decide to do that. You know, you can't make that decision because that's not what your place is. And I think that's something that's very important, clearly very important to Lewis in terms of his position and station, maybe a little less important to someone like Clark. But at the same time, both those guys are military. You know, they were served and trained. And so that sort of thing matters to them. But
right.
yeah, I mean,
I think the confusing thing to me is that this isn't officially a branch of the armed forces. They have just decided to act like it is.
Well, it's because they were commissioned as such.
They're commissioned, right? They're commissioned by the president, but
yeah.
That and like they've got a rough crew to organize, so I guess that's just the way to keep them in line is say, like,
exactly,
nope, we're going full military code on this.
Yeah. Well, and I think also given what this book does in terms of the danger that was previously untold to the crew, again, the idea of like, you're here to do what we say. And if we say you do this, you know, which is why last week when we talked about the mutiny there, it's why we used the word mutiny. Because, you know, because that's what it was. They said, we don't want to follow these orders anymore because they have no other recourse. If they don't follow the orders, you know, the mutiny that happened at the end of, you know, last week in volumes 5 and 6, the reason you use that term kind of mutiny there, because if they don't want to follow orders, like they can't. Their choice is either follow the orders or you're abandoned, you're sent away to die. So if you want to continue living, you have to take the power back. You have to take control and overthrow your leaders. And again, that terminology and phraseology only works if you're talking about military hierarchy. So regardless of if you are a citizen at this point or a convict or military in the core of Discovery, like they're using military hierarchy. And so you have to abide by that for good or for ill. That is what is going to determine your fate and how you navigate this trip. So yeah, they're kind of using that shield there, but I mean, that is it, to see Collins, his kind of, and it does make sense though, right? Because I presume at this point, they know where their story is going, they being Dingess and Roberts. So you introduce Collins as a very sympathetic character, but still goes along with what happens at the end of volume 3. Right. And then little by little, we see more and more. And then we see him sink to this point right here, where he just decides to wipe out all these baby worm things, to get him at a point when he would be standing in front of Navath at this altar and being like, I don't want to keep living. So like, might as well do something out of this, you know? And for him to be like, I don't want anything either, you know, because like, I guess his eyes have been opened as like how terrible the world is, and also what his place in that terrible world is as well. And so,
and you have to ask yourself if you can live down the things that you, like the atrocities you've committed.
Yeah, yeah. And clearly his answer was no. And I don't want anything out of it because I don't deserve anything out of it. I think it's the way I read it. It's like I don't deserve any sort of gift or boon or wish or anything like that. I just want this to be over. And if it means, at the very least, getting rid of all these horrors in a way that isn't us just slaughtering them, then like that's worth it enough for him. But I like that they laid enough track for him for his motivation to be clear, right? I guess again, the nitpick I mentioned earlier was simply the reveal of his background of him being a candidate for the sacrifice. But I have no qualms at all with the way they tracked his motivation, the way they tracked his character to get to a point to where that sort of sacrifice, where he would be at such the end of his rope. He'd be so low, so despondent, so broken that this would be an option for him and one that made sense. And so in his mind, I guess the only option that made sense.
Yeah. We gotta keep moving because we're only halfway through the first volume here. As I'm flipping through it, I had almost completely forgot about the rabbit women, which I actually really enjoyed.
Yeah. That's right. I forgot about that too. Yeah,
exactly.
It
was like it just gets so big at the end, but that was the type of thing that you would have built the whole trade around. And instead, it was like an issue or two. By the time you get to the end, and it makes sense. Not a complaint. It makes sense. Where we are in terms of the big mo with this story. It's just got to be, it's got to be getting bigger. It's got to be moving faster. You can't slow down. And they have reached the point where they're like, we're not gathering more data. We're not collecting information. We're not doing this. Survive. They're on this clear march, which was the other reason that it was just like Collins was right. It was like, no, we're not going to synthesize milk. We're not going to save these creatures. We're not even taking samples back in jars anymore. You said that we just keep moving now. We see arches. We walk. Give it a wide berth.
We could go around them. Yeah. We're avoiding.
Which, as a reader, it was what I was voting for from volume 1 on. But it was that conquest mentality of Manifest Destiny.
Yeah.
And their commission.
It was part of their charge, and so there was at least early on there was the veneer of, and actually no, that's the wrong word because they weren't actually supposed to document this stuff. That was part of their mission as well. Yes, it was to get to the Pacific, and it was to sacrifice the child so they could have this wish granted of them conquering kind of the whole land there. But they were also supposed to act like that wasn't Lewis being like, I'm interested in this. He's interested in it, but he also was supposed to be doing that. So the point at which they decide that we're just going to survive and make it to the end, once kind of like all cards are laid on the table, that actually goes against what their commission was. So yeah, you're right. Collins is correct in his assessment there, being like, just because we got stopped here doesn't mean we have to stay stopped.
Right.
This thing came out, we defeated it. Let's move. Let's go. Let's keep going, because that's what you said we were doing, right? Think about all I'm sure he's in his mind's like, how many arches did we skip? How many things did we deliberately avoid? And just because we ran into one, and just because it has babies there, we're going to stop. Yeah, didn't stop us before, so why are we doing it now? So
yeah, I know. I am team Collins on.
Which
the internal logic of it, again, not pro-genocide.
Yeah.
I don't agree with anyone's actions in this story, which is exactly where I expected to be when I opened volume 1. And to my surprise, by the end of volumes 1 and 2, I'm like, I'm kind of rooting for these guys.
Yeah. But I think they did a good job. I think Dingess and Roberts did a good job of showing all sides of these men.
Right. Yeah.
Showing that Clark is a little more curious and a little more empathetic. And that Lewis, while being curious and knowledgeable, also is kind of a dick. That all these people have sides to them, and they're generally not good people. But that doesn't mean they can't do good things along the way here and there. Doesn't mean they can't have good or decent intentions while
Right.
still
They
also
can
being
occasionally have
terrible.
altruistic motives.
Exactly. Yeah. When it aligns with what their goal is,
Right.
and that's not a cross purpose. They don't see that as being an issue with them. So yeah, I like that they were well-rounded characters that were still ultimately terrible people, you know?
Yeah.
They weren't just one note terrible of this is what we're supposed to this is what we're going to do out there. We saw all sides of them, but they weren't redeemed in any way, right? They weren't whitewashed and being like they weren't idolized and glorified in that way.
Which was my biggest fear going into the book. But I was like,
100%.
It was published late enough that I just can't see them getting away with some hagiography of Lewis and Clark.
Exactly. There is no point. You're right. There is no point.
If this were from the 80s, I'd be really worried.
They'd be a different story then. But yeah, in the modern age, even though this book is 10 plus years old when it first started, there is no reason to revisit eras of known U.S. history to somehow make it better, to be like all the stories you heard, actually, they were so much better than that, when we know now that it was all terrible.
Yeah.
So the challenge then becomes how do you show and visualize kind of that terribleness, which is, maybe borderlining at times on like outright evil, but like, how do you show that in a way that is compelling and interesting, and still, not justifies why they were revered in the first place, but that shows that they did and accomplished great things, but did them in like the worst way possible.
Yeah.
So they're not glorifying for the actions, but shown that what they did was still significant. Like things, you know what I'm saying? Like them traversing through the unknown West, or as far as we know, the unknown West, and making it back alive. Like that's pretty incredible. What they did to the land and the people they encountered along the way, not so good, but still making it there and back that's notable. So like you can still say this is pretty incredible and pretty great, but these people suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing in 7 is, the character we knew who was gay.
Yeah.
You see him, kissing a man, which I think was supposed to maybe make us gasp or something. But I was like, even in 2014, I would have been like, it's 2014. What's like, I know that we're supposed to understand that those characters are scandalized back when this is happening.
Well, but
since they aren't, and Lewis's reaction is basically the modern person's reaction.
Well, but we see in the flashback when Lewis is called, right before he's called to meet Jefferson. Yeah. We see him in bed with a man and a woman.
Right.
So like,
no, I mean, they threatened him. Jefferson was a little more explicit in threatening him. Even.
But he's basically like I know what your extracurricular activities are.
I can, I can leak this one piece of information. Not that you're womanizing or cheating, but like this one piece of information, and you're done. So I think was meant to say that of the characters present there, of the people present there, that Lewis would have been the least shocked about that. But yeah, I don't know if it was I think it was. I guess they got a happy ending. I guess because they're part of the crew that actually made it to the end. And when Lewis and Clark dismissed everyone, they were like, "Peace out, we're gone," and we don't see them again. Essentially, like they're done. So good for them, I guess. But I don't know if it was meant to be shock value or anything like that. Other than to show that again, Lewis has a little wider and greater understanding of kind of the human condition, I guess, because of his own view of things and his own experience. I don't know what it was meant to show, really. Again, I don't know if that was meant to be significant at all. You're right, though. It did feel like it was supposed to be a little significant.
and
I
then
mean, maybe
ultimately end
the
up being
issue
like,
came out in Pride Month. Like it could have been as simple
nah, I
because
don't
it
know.
was just
I
like
mean,
a little.
like stuff like that is way too forced. I would highly doubt that was the case. I think it was just they wanted to show a character moment, and maybe just to show that like not everyone here is terrible, like truly terrible.
Well, or they're not terrible in every way.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
yeah,
all
he's
these men
fine
did, all these
slaughtering
men
this, and
did
this, or whipping a
exactly.
man on
Yeah,
his
yeah, yeah,
team, but totally fine with them pursuing some degree of happiness. In fact,
yeah.
there were no repercussions for that. Whereas like the men hooking up with the rabbit women, it didn't go great. Which
Well, yeah,
like
but
I didn't
their
know what the
repercussions came
twist would
immediately.
be,
Yeah.
but I did not expect them to turn into giant rabbits.
The giant rabbit thing was not on my bingo card either. Them just slaughtering men, I thought was definitely going to be in play from the jump.
Yes.
Like an Amazonian kind of tribe there. But yeah, the rabbit thing was definitely unexpected.
Again,
But
I
it was
liked it.
oh no, but and
Like I
also
thought it was cool.
it was a quick and dirty way to we gotta pare down this group of explorers to the nitty gritty here. So what happens here? Everyone dies except for Jensen. You know,
Right.
everyone who went out to and went out and kind of party with them, they all dead, and that's it. So it served a narrative function for them as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So is it in volume 8 or is it in volume 7 where they finally discuss why there are two journals? Or was that in 6? No, we didn't talk about that yet.
No,
See, okay.
that's
Listeners,
in 7.
okay, that is in 7 because I was like, you and I talked about that in person when we weren't recording.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
at a comic convention last weekend, and now I'm all thrown off because we usually don't talk about what we're going to talk about. We save it all for recording.
Yeah, no, that was
But
in
that was
yeah.
I thought that was a very nice twist, and I've kind of hated the Spanish conquistador
Maldonado
ghost character. Like I just
Yeah.
thought the whole plot point was dumb,
Yes.
but that made it pretty cool. Like
Yeah.
that they were like reading like language that like basically it was them retracing like in ways in which they had been incepted, right? It's like, oh, we both started using these words.
That's a good point.
And that's because there's some force leaning on both of us that's pushing us both to this thing.
Yeah.
And they were like underlining those words and catching things. And I was like, okay, that's really good. Like
that's a good way of putting that. I like the inception. The idea of like, I wouldn't normally use this word, but why am I repeating it? And then also, why are you repeating it? Well, A plus B equals then C. And this idea that, that they're tracking their own sanity essentially by having the other person also track their own sanity. And by looking at it together, they can be like, okay, you know what? This is actually happening and there is something larger going on. No, I agree. I like that reveal. I thought that was cool and interesting. And it wasn't just, because it goes back to in volumes 5 and 6, when Clark writes about how Lewis is making him journal. Lewis is making him write. I hate writing.
Right. I hate writing.
Yeah. And in the moment, it is framed as simply a different narrative device because, as we talked about last week, there are a bunch of journal entries from different characters where we jump into the headspace of various characters in the core, and Clark just happens to be one of them, right? Under the guise of Lewis is away from the boat and can't write. So, he was quote unquote making Clark do it, which I'm sure he was doing that as well. But then we get the reveal here that they had an ulterior motive, this kind of sanity check of the two of them. So yeah, again, I like that. I like that explanation. We can call it a twist, I guess. I like that reveal. Because I'm with you. Maldonado
It was a
character,
plot that I was just kind of trotting along through.
Yeah,
it was like, it's not my favorite, but there's not that much of it, and I like everything else going on, so I'll just deal with it. Well, and it kind of redeemed it.
And I liked it because up until then, Maldonado had all we knew about him, his whole goal was he's trying to get people to get to Navath, right?
Right.
He's like the herald, and he's just pitting people against each other. He's trying to find a survivor, right? And so we know what his end game is. We know what he's trying to do. So when he appears to Clark and says one thing, and then he appears to Lewis and says something else, we know what he's trying to do. And it's just a matter of, well, they got to get to the end before we see what his deal is. And so to have the characters kind of flip that around and be like, no, we're on to you. To show that they're a little self-aware. Yeah, I'm with you. It helped redeem that. It pumps some life and some interest into that story, into that character that I didn't have before. Because I felt like he was only there just to nudge them towards the end. We knew they had to get to anyway. Because it wasn't like they weren't. It wasn't like they were never not going to make it to that final archway at the Pacific Ocean. So everything that Maldonado is doing, we know is going to be somewhat in some capacity successful, because we know they have to get to the end. They have to get there. So why is he constantly nagging them and appearing to them and doing all this stuff there? Because we as a reader, I think as an informed reader, this book has to end with the face off with the demon. So if they're going to get there, then that's
when you learn.
job.
So he has to get them there because then he gets released from that mantle because someone else comes in and takes his right. So
yeah.
He is a ghost just seeking liberation. Like, I don't really care what happens to you guys. I just need someone.
I need someone.
Like,
It's
Galactus, right? It's in the Fantastic Four movie.
I know, that's what I'm saying. He is the herald of Navath. But once again, we understand his motivation, but we know they're going to make it there. Like at no point are they not going to make it there. So him constantly appearing and talking to them and kind of pushing them towards that goal, we know that's their goal. And it doesn't matter to me, it didn't matter what his motivations were, because they were always going to end up in front of the demon at that last
we don't the
Yeah.
goal was so clearly established from the beginning.
Yeah.
We know where it has to end.
Yeah.
So the only things left are what are the stakes once you get there.
Exactly. Yeah. And Maldonado's stakes don't matter. Exactly.
Right.
His stakes don't matter. So I said I had lost interest whenever he showed up and kind of did his thing. I kind of tuned out on those. It's like, I don't really care what you're saying because you don't matter in this story. But again, to at least not play out the facade, the guys that Lewis and Clark were at odds because Maldonado was talking to them in different ears, to show that they were actually united, if not against him, but at least about him. So that was a nice reveal to at least give that a little more interest, at least temporarily, to kind of put that to rest now. We know your game, and now we can move forward. And now it's about what our confrontation is with Navath at the Pacific Ocean. That's the big bad. That's the thing that's really important.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so now finally into volume 8, which is pretty fast paced. Like that felt like a total downhill sled. Not like falling off a cliff of quality. I just meant like the down coast part of the roller coaster where it's just like no more bumps, no more twists, no more turns. Like we're going full velocity toward the end.
Yeah, because
pausing for backstory.
Because we know what the end goal is, and so there's no point in delaying that. Again, we have to get there because at this point in volume, at that point they've laid bare what all the important people know what the goal is, what they're trying to do. So now it's a matter of getting there, getting in front of that altar, and now having that final confrontation, which is actually amongst themselves, because Nevada doesn't care. He just wants someone to be there to sacrifice himself, or to be sacrificed. He doesn't care who it is. He doesn't care who does it. He just wants someone to do it. Right. And so that big conversation. So we just have to get everyone to the end there so they can have, on a character level, they can have their giant final conflict. And I thought again, as I mentioned earlier, I thought they showed a good spectrum of reactions and decision making, both good and for ill, across the characters that were present there.
Yeah, 100%.
They were believable.
Yeah, I still like at the end. I found myself still very much in favor of Sacagawea, even though her her stakes were a little less clear to me. Like it seemed like she'd been trying to keep the child at a distance, sort of worked, but was still ultimately willing to sacrifice the child, for the greater good of, her,
but that's
her
the point of
people, her
keeping a
family.
distance from the child.
Right. But it seemed like she had kind of gotten attached, which means,
Yeah.
well, like if she remained completely detached, then it's like, congratulations, you did it. There's not really any stakes. It's not as costly of a sacrifice.
Well, there is a moment there where someone calls her out, like everyone cares for this child except for you, and she has a response like that's not true. And I think what they were trying to show, the way I read that ultimately was like she loves this child so much, but understands that like the world the child would grow up in with the white men around isn't a world she maybe wants to give to her child. So it's like, I love this child so much, I'm willing to sacrifice him for the betterment of everybody, knowing that it would kill me and destroy me. I feel like so that's what they're trying to go for there.
Yeah,
I don't know
it's totally what they were trying to go for.
yeah.
And
I don't know how well that landed, or sorry, how well they pulled it off, but that's the sense I thought they were going for.
yes, no, I agree that that's what they were going for. And, I think it was pretty effective. They just like, I would have loved just a little more time. I feel like we got her way backstory of like, here's how she learned to use a spear and how she got so tough. And then it skipped a lot of time up to the present. Some of it was kind of intuitively backfilled by the presence of her brother. And you got
That's
a little
good point,
insight
actually.
there.
That's a good point.
That was the problem for me. It's like I couldn't follow her whole journey.
You saying that remind me of something that I thought about while I was reading it, but didn't have in my notes. The piece of backstory I would have liked is her being told explicitly what she would have to sacrifice.
Right.
Because we know early on that she's told she's got to make a sacrifice. You have to, blah, blah, blah. And that's when she's a child, right? And then the early part of her training. But seeing her having to grapple with, no, you have to go and have a child with the white man in order to then sacrifice it to save our people. That is what your sacrifice is. Seeing her process that before she's had the child and being told, this is what you have to do. Like, this is exactly explicitly what needs to happen. Seeing a flashback for that would have been interesting, because that would have been the moment where she would have to probably grapple with whatever feelings she might have for it. And then maybe to see her come to that steely resolve and then understand, okay, this is what I have to do. I've already, at least at the moment, I've already come to terms with what I have to do. And then once the child is born, some of that conflict in her face and in her decision making, we understand that now her resolve is breaking. Because you're right, when we meet her immediately when we know she's pregnant, her resolve is already set. We don't see her grapple with that decision. So we're under the impression that she's always been fine with this, right?
Yeah,
that she's accepted it from the start. And
I guess I also
grapple with that early on.
I don't understand why she needed to team up with this crew of white men. Like, if she's clearly the best hunter around, and there were people who trained her who were better than her, why not? Why didn't they just send their own cohort of people? And especially if they already knew the sacrifice required at the end, and presumably what the trade-off would be, which is we can solve all of our problems in one fell blow. And why was it like her? Like, you talked earlier in the series about her kind of chosen one quality. Yeah. And I agree that it's there, but it's never explained why it's
never
there.
Explained. Yeah.
Like why is she the chosen one?
Yeah, why was she picked? Why? Yeah. No, yeah. Then those are all fair questions. But
I think it was like, I think, I suspect the writer, Chris Dingess, could give us a reason, but the real reason is
because
she was there historically. Exactly. Yeah. So it's like. Yeah. So we just had to write an in canon story of why she would be there.
Yes. Yeah.
So anyway, so don't overthink that one. but also, yeah. And then I think we both called it with, oh God, York.
Yeah.
We
Mhm.
were like, wait, you can't kill him
Yeah.
and you can't set him free.
Yeah.
Like those are the two rules set up
Yeah.
basically by this
But
book.
I give them credit though.
They shot him in the back,
Have him
and
get
it sure
shot
made it seem like he
in the
was going to be
back.
set
Yeah.
free.
And there was a moment there when I read that when I thought it might have been Clark that shot him.
Oh, that would have been wild.
Because we know because at this point, right, he has York has taken Jean Baptiste and is like, if it's the last thing I ever do, like we're not killing you, like so he runs off with him, and then they go chasing after him, and we know that Clark specifically is chasing after him because he meets up with him after he throws Jensen off the cliff. But there was a moment when I was like, oh my God, did they have Clark shoot him? Like that's super dark at that point. Because in my mind, I'm still thinking, well, they're still going to adhere to what happens post expedition, which we'll get to in a little bit. But there was a brief moment where I was like, that's super dark. But then they made it Jensen and like, okay, that's cool. York can kill Jensen. And that's exactly what happens. You
And
know?
Jensen's had that look on his face for
Oh,
8
yeah.
volumes. I mean,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable how long they telegraphed. Like,
Yeah.
these are all bad guys, but this is like the bad guy of the bad guys.
Yes, yeah, he's the actual bad guy, the guy that was convicted for something that you would still be convicted of today. Like he's that kind of bad guy, and so yeah, it was cathartic for York then to be the one to throw him off a cliff, you know, to hit for him to get that level of the narrative satisfaction, I guess, you know. But yeah, I will admit there's a moment when I'm like, oh no, because I think I said last week, like that's a deal breaker for me. Like if they were to deviate that strongly from the historical record and be like, our one black man, our one enslaved person who we know lives, we're gonna kill him off. That's
Extremely
a really
rough.
bad look.
Yeah.
And so I think I said last week, like that'd be a total deal breaker for me. And so there was that brief moment where I thought, oh God, they did not just do that. But no, he got shot in the back in the shoulder area and, you know, he'll live. So that worked out all right. But that was hats off to them. That was a good fake out because it 100% got me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Jensen, okay. So that's the other thing. It's like, yes, Jensen's like wickedness was telegraphed for a long time, but his end game was be the villain. I mean, presumably he had some wish that he wanted that we don't know, and his plan was go make a sacrifice, make a wish.
No. I
What was
didn't
his
know.
plan?
I think his plan was like, you think I'm going back to the people that locked me up and say, hey, I made it back, give me my payment, and they're not going to lock me up again? I think,
Which which is then interesting that it's him and York together. York believes the promise made to him. Jensen does not.
Yeah. I read it as like, I'm not going back. But
I guess my thing is like, you're already in the West Coast, just live off the grid, man. Like,
which I think was probably what his goal going to be, but it was like, before I go, I'm gonna take out the one guy I hate here. But yeah, I don't think he cared at all about the sacrifice and the wish and being in control of that. He just wasn't going to go back because I think in his mind, he's like, I got nothing to go back to. You know, like they're not going to
honestly
treat me
so much worse than if he had some big villainous plan of like, I'm going to get this and make myself president with the wish.
I think he's just actually evil. He's like, you know what? I'm not going back, but before I leave, before I go wherever I'm going to go, which is not back to where I came from, I'm going to kill York first, you know?
Yeah.
Cause he thinks he deserves it. So yeah, no, he's a terrible character. He's the one kind of truly actually evil character. Like no shades to him at all. He is actually evil. So, but yeah, you know, it was a fitting end, and you know, to jump all the way to the end and the coda there, the fact that he ends up as the new herald apparently of Navath. Appearing to Eros Saarinen at the very, very end, seems fitting that he be trapped in this eternal cycle of what I assume is some not great undead afterlife, right? That Maldonado had.
Yeah.
that sort of thing. You know, whatever deal for his soul or whatnot, whatever you want to call it, he's trapped in that contract now.
Yeah. So going back to DC, um, I mean, hats off again. I've said this all throughout the series, but this volume 8, I feel like the scale of the artwork just got so extreme, even for this series. Like the task of it,
Yeah.
you go mountain climbing, then their journey back across the country. He just gives you these vignettes of, plains and starlights and open fields and rivers and mountains and everything. Just so much work went into these last few issues.
Yeah.
And I had to imagine the fatigue and the grind of this series was starting to wear on him.
Oh yeah, well, and I mean, at this point too, at the end here, we're crossing into 2020 now. In these last couple, I think these last two volumes here, somewhere in there is when we're locked down, and a lot of things real iffy in the comic industry at that point. So, yeah, it would have been. There's an extra mental psychological strain of just the world being on fire at that point. You talk about the art. One page that I loved was one of the very few double page splashes in this book. They did not do a lot of that. That was not something that I don't know if it was a decision that was made or whatnot, but they did a lot of single page splashes.
Yeah.
Right, where maybe we're highlighting a big moment,
the bum moment, the TV moments at the
end of an episode, end of an issue sort of thing, kind of a capper there. But there weren't a lot of double page spreads, and there was, I think, just an absolutely gorgeous one towards the end when Collins is talking to the Val. Yeah, and he. And him and the mouth are talking, and you kind of get this beautiful color there by Owen Janeni of the kind of orange, just kind of fire-ish kind of thing, which is kind of Navath's kind of fire demon kind of motif, right? And we're seeing these flashbacks, I guess, to
when it kind of
memories.
Gives him wings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That fire there, the imagery is beautiful, but just the idea of, I guess these are the memories or things of all these terrible experiences that Collins has been through. And it's visualized so beautifully, and it's so different from what we see other parts of the book. And I think that's specific because we're dealing with this different entity now. But that page just really jumped out at me. Again, not only for the double page splash, but the vibrant use of color and that kind of overtone of that orange yellow kind of fire motif there. I just thought it looked so good.
Yeah. And a good cliffhanger there, because that ends with, the demon saying, "What would you want?" If you did this, and you leave him for like an issue,
and you see him pick up the knife. You see him holding it, but we don't see. We don't. The action jumps away. The next time we see him, he's lying on the altar with the knife in his chest.
Yeah.
So yeah, we jump. We don't see him make the decision. We jump back to the action of everybody else scrambling and fighting amongst themselves, trying to get Jean Baptiste. So yeah, no, that it is a beautiful visual shot, and a great and just a great narrative moment too.
Yeah. That pretty much, aside from the ending, which I believe they changed in terms of they added the suicide, or is that true?
No, that is, well, no. So this is the thing I loved the most about this book, legitimately, was that they wrapped up everyone's story, all of our known historical figures, in line with the historical with history, in terms of how their lives played out and what their actions were. Lewis's life after the expedition wasn't very long and pretty tragic and terrible. Yeah, he died of a gunshot wound. I think there was some debate of whether he was shot or was suicide.
They left it up to the reader, I think, in this one, even though I think you see him kind of pick up.
No.
But you hear them talking about it, right? Yeah, I understand in history.
In history, he was shot. There was some debate as to whether it was suicide or he was murdered.
Right.
But
I understand that, and that's what the book also conveyed, even though I think they tipped the scale.
They show the gun to his head. Yeah.
But people put guns to their head contemplating, like he could have had suicidal
Yes.
ideation and been shot by someone else.
Entirely possible. Yes, yeah. But
So
I
like,
think
I still think they left it open, but they tipped just
yeah.
slightly in favor of that, which I think the historical record tips the other direction.
Actually, I think it tips towards suicide.
Oh,
Actually,
does it? Okay.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. Because I think what I liked is specifically with Lewis, it's like they started from the end and say, how does this guy who did this thing that is lauded in American history, and it was a critical and important moment in history, the core discovery, how does he come back from that and like only a handful of years later end up dead after being granted the governorship of Louisiana? Like he got the thing that Jefferson promised. How does his life end up that way? And I love the way they showed him at the end talking about like, no, this is my glory. I'm supposed to be the hero. This is why I'm here. And we see that side of him that we hadn't seen in full throughout the story. But in the end, this desperation of, no, I need to be the hero. And he fails at that. And when they return back into Washington, we see that, yeah, they're lauded as heroes, right? They get the parade, they get all this stuff there, but Jefferson's pissed at them because they failed. They succeeded in some sense, but they failed on the actual mission. They did not make the sacrifice. They didn't get the wish. They didn't get the thing they set out for. So Lewis comes back and he gets the thing that he wanted, right? He got the governorship. He is hailed as a hero by the public, but he knows he's a failure inside. And so the book put him in a mindset to where he would make the same choice.
Right.
It would explain the choice. Yeah, it would explain the choice that he makes.
But really, it's like presumably the same reason. It's like the trip was so hard and so many horrible things
absolutely
must have happened.
Yeah. How do you come down from that? Right. How do you come down from that? What do you do next? What can happen in life when you know what's out there? Absolutely. And again, the idea that in the end they dovetail this with actual history. And again, not just Lewis, Clark as well. I mean, we start getting at the end there, we get a little journal writing from Jean-Baptiste, and he talks about what happened to Sacagawea. She doesn't live very long after this, and kind of not having a home. The fact that he was warded and basically adopted by Clark. The interaction with Clark in York, which is perfect, which again is, as far as we understand the character, the person of York, the actual person that lived, that he may have had a wife, I think in the Louisville area, maybe even a child. And this idea that he was under the understanding that he would be freed so he could go and reunite with them. And Clark was like, nah, man, your property, I own you. And the way that we saw that, the way that we see them interact early on in the story is not master slave, right? It's a little more equal, which again is the understanding of that's how York was treated on the trip. But as it got further, as we got towards the end, we saw Clark constantly reminding York, no, man, like I own you. You don't talk to me this way. Just because we're on this trip here and you've had some modicum of freedom, you don't have freedom. You're here because I say you are. It's like as we got towards the end, that frayed more and more and more. And even though in the end, he is there after York is shot and helps him up and is like, no, we can't do this. They're kind of agreed on that point. We see when they reach back, when they get back afterwards, he's like, nah, man, like, you're not free. And the idea that again reflects what we know about what happened between York and Clark in history. They found another way again to align their story, the circumstances of their story, in such a way that it lines up with what we know happened in history after the expedition. And again, to them lining that up again at the end, again, is my favorite part of the book. The fact that they were able to plausibly put their characters in the same place as the historical figures and have it make sense. And have it not betray the story that they told and the history that we know.
Yeah, it's a very fine tightrope to walk.
Very tightrope walk. Yes.
And then, obviously me being a former St. Louis and
Yeah.
loved the building of the arch at the end.
Yeah.
And I think in our second episodes of, volumes 3 and 4, you said something about how one of the last pages will need to be the St. Louis Arch. It did not end up
Oh,
having
yeah.
any particular meaning other than like kind of a wink and nod reference to like,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. It was, the implication is that Eros Saarinen was inspired by Navath and the arches. But yeah, I think we had talked about the idea like, is the arch, is it a gateway that closes? Is it constructed to like a defense mechanism against the creatures or whatnot? And yeah, in the end, I think it's just a nod of like, the reason this thing exists, the reason why it's here is because Navath still has some level of influence over the West,
Well, and he still has
like a reminder that he's still there.
a spirit
Herald,
phantom
yeah.
poltergeist.
Yeah, he has a herald. Yeah, he still has Jensen out there.
Still puts his thumb on the scale and presumably is looking to be relieved of the duty.
Yeah, maybe so. So yeah, it implies that Navath isn't gone entirely, that he still has a presence there, and which is a fun Easter egg there because again, you can't use the idea of arches in your story and not end on
especially
the
when you
actual
start
arch that's there.
presumably at St. Louis.
Yeah. Well, which they don't actually start in St. Louis, but yeah,
I just felt like they did.
Yeah. Well, the Lewis and Clark, the expedition starts there, but the story that is where Lewis and Clark. That's where Lewis and Clark meet up because they don't start the journey together. They meet up in St. Louis and then begin traveling north. Our story starts when they're already together. So, based on the timeline, they would have already left St. Louis. But yeah, you can't have that visual of that first view of the arch right in front of a river and not think of the Gateway Arch, right? So yeah, it's a clearly intentional nod to what they, I guess, presumably knew that they were always going to end at, this idea of tying it back some way to the actual Gateway Arch, which I thought is fun.
Yeah. So overall, as a series, what are your takeaways on the series as a whole? Do you think you'll read it again, or do you think not immediately, but like, a few years from now, I'll have fun flipping through it again? Or is this kind of oftentimes horror for me is kind of a read it once, it sticks with me pretty well. I don't.
Yeah. I don't know how often I return to this. I wouldn't return to, like, if I return to it, it would not be, and this is no knock against Chris Dingess's writing, because there's a lot of journal entries and all that stuff. I don't think I'd return to it to that. I think I'd return to it just to revisit the story again, and doing that by panels and seeing some of the moments and, reading pages here and there. Overall, I really enjoyed the series. I liked that it managed to keep me on my toes throughout, and that when it zagged, it didn't zag in like a, oh my God, what happened situation. Like, it wasn't like a complete out of left field zag. They had a twist in there that I simply wasn't expecting. Though I was, let me put it this way. As I was reading the book, there are moments when I was expecting something to happen. And something did happen, but it wasn't the thing that I expected. Does that make sense? So it wasn't the event that surprised me because I was expecting an event, but the specific way they revealed it or showed it, that's the thing that kept me on toes. Like I said about things like, throwing me off with York getting shot. The idea of, obviously Collins is going to sacrifice himself. They made that clear when he announced he was a war child, when he revealed that. But the motivation behind it and what his ultimate reasoning and the wish he made or wish he didn't make, that reveal, that part kept me on my toes. That kept me guessing. So even when the narrative beat is seemingly obvious, they still found a way to keep me engaged in the story. So for that, I really enjoyed it. And I think it's fun at times to take a swing at alternate history. and again, tying it back, like, veering so wildly outside of history to these supernatural beings and creatures, and finding a way to steer it all the way back in to merge it in the end perfectly with the known history. That to me is an incredible feat.
Yeah, I prefer that type of swing
Yeah.
to like the literary historical fiction where they're
the complete fiction.
No, the historical fiction where it's like, well, here are the events that actually happened, but I'm going to just color in the lines now and just guess what was in the lines. And not
like generic Larson type stuff, like Devil in the White City kind of stuff, or like fictionalized versions of history.
Yeah, I guess now I'm realizing I may have gotten myself into trouble there because I'm like, I think I just attacked half of Shakespeare's plays.
You totally have. Yeah, absolutely.
Like Julius Caesar. It's just like, here's the real thing. He was murdered. These were not the conversations that were had leading up to and prior to his murder. So I'm like, I guess I prefer, but like Shakespeare was not making a claim that like you're learning history, with these plays.
Even though they're called history play, like they're grouped together as history. Yeah.
Well, it is a complete, like he has a complete in canon history for his stuff. Yes. Which, by the way, have you seen the someone is doing illustrated like 2 or 3 issue chunks for different Shakespeare things right now. There's a Macbeth comic that came out in 2 or 3 issues, and it looks really cool. And I was like, oh man, that would be an obscure twist for us, but might be real if it's any good at all, which obviously source material gonna be great. From Clover Press. So the other thing is it might be hard to get a hold of. Tragedy of Macbeth. Stuart Kenneth Moore is writer and artist, and hilariously, William Shakespeare has a page on League of Comic Geeks now because of this. Because of this this adaptation.
Well, he's a credited author. Yeah, he's a credited creator. So that's interesting. But no, I think I'm with you. If you're going to take a swing at alternate history, I like to see something that's super wild, but doesn't change the outcome.
Yes.
Yeah. But again, so the way that this story was told is the end result is the same. We get to the same point in history, right? But now we understand like the rest of the story, right? We understand the full motivation. We understand the full kind of psychological weight of what happened on the trip, but the end result is the same. And that I think is like, because it's like you've taken your supernatural alternate history to put a new context on history, but you haven't changed it at all, versus just creating a whole new alternate history. And if you're going to do that, like, at that point, just tell your own story, I guess, in my mind, really. Like, I don't see why we need to take known history and tweak it just to fit your story.
Well, and that's
just create a new history.
You just hit the nail on the head, because for me, like, if you're going to tell the story the way it was. And if you want to tell something that's like pretty close, but not 100%, just fictionalize all of it. And then people will be like, isn't it cool that like this totally fiction thing is really pretty close to real life events?
Yeah.
Like people get excited about that connection, but as soon as
then you can make an allegory, you can make commentary.
It's an allegory. And people get super excited when they find out about that, especially when it's hidden. Like, I watched the movie Our Brother Where Art Thou for years, and somehow had missed at the beginning when it says like this is their version of the Odyssey.
The Odyssey, yeah.
And someone mentioned that conversation, and just like scales fell from my eyes. It was like, I'm like, there's a Cyclops. It's like literally
there's
everything.
Cyclops, there's Siren,
there's a flood. It's just like
flood.
It's like, oh my god, like it's so obvious. And not only is it's not just obvious for like a keen viewer, it's literally written in the opening credits. It is not hidden in any way, but it's so different. So like, now that like Chris Nolan is doing the Odyssey, I'm sure I was gonna say Latin scholars, but like people like my wife who took like high school Latin and translated the Iliad and the Odyssey for fun are going to be very pedantic about, which things are included, which things are changed, what's left out, what's left in, what's overemphasized versus, like, well, that was only, kind of like your Lord of the Rings sort of show, like, Helm's Deep is like 6 pages in the book. And
no, I think it's a paragraph.
It's a paragraph. Yeah.
I think it's a paragraph.
And it's like
battle happened. That was it.
Yeah. And, oh my gosh, what's
Peter Jackson?
Peter Jackson was like, well, that's what I'm doing for the next 3 months of my life, making this Battle of Helm's Deep.
Yeah. Well, I think with that too, like, I'm sure I'm sure it'll be great, but I think there was already commentary. People were like, hey, these costumes aren't historically accurate. And it's like, bruh, there's a Cyclops in this. Like, where's the Cyclops historically accurate? Like,
well, and let's come on, let's say the most obvious one, like people picking on the wardrobe. I'm like,
I know that's what I'm saying.
Matt Damon is not historically accurate.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
that's the big one.
Yeah, you want to claim it's not faithful to the source material. That's fine, but don't tell me the source material is actual history. Miss me with that stuff. But they, but like that's that is what you invite when you're saying I'm doing the Odyssey versus what the Coens did when they're saying we're telling the story of the Odyssey in a completely different way.
Yeah.
I
love it.
It gives you that kind of that buffer, that shield from that sort of criticism. You're saying we're not telling the Odyssey, we're telling the story of the Odyssey through a different lens. Which it allows you to do more things. It frees you up to take a bigger swing and
sometimes is more accurate to the content, like the message, the idea of the book.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
than following a beat by beat script.
You get the heart of what the story is trying to
that point
to come across.
To bring it all back home, I think Manifest Destiny, the characters arrive, right where they do in history.
Yes.
And it totally makes, like, what we saw in this book makes more sense of how they ended up where they were at the end of real life events than what likely happened. Yeah. And so in that way, like, it shows the true horrors of their mission, even though none of the horrors are true.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's again, which is why that is my favorite part of the book there. Like, history isn't changed because we know how these men ended up. We know they got back and we know what happened to them. We know how they were celebrated and lauded and we know how their lives ended. And our fictional story here puts them in the exact same place with maybe even, like you said, maybe even more context, more understanding, even though that experience is so wildly, ridiculous and absurd in terms of these crazy kaiju monsters they were fighting, but it gives a clearer explanation in some ways of how they ended up the way they did. And it's the fact that it doesn't contradict history in that way, I think is kind of the real high watermark for the book for me. The fact that they landed that plane in that way. Because I was a little worried about, like, how are they going to square the ending of their story with what we know the ending of history to be, and for them to land it so perfectly in my mind, that really bolsters this book in my opinion. I think in terms of having a plan, executing it, and whether or not I like every twist and turn of the story as it went through, the fact that they had a plan and they nailed it at the end and got to where they wanted to be perfectly, to me that does a lot for me as a reader.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Masterful strokes by Chris Dingess, just amazing art all the way through from Matthew Roberts. And that splash page you were talking about shows the coloring, which I don't think we talked about enough throughout the series.
We probably didn't. Owen Gianni was phenomenal.
Just on fire. And volume 8 was just really, and they had switched to digital art, I think, by 7 and 8.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense there. That makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. Yeah.
And which like they had switched for speed and practical reasons, I believe um, is the story. But then it also worked out better because of COVID to finish digitally. With
Yeah,
artwork and
that's right.
everything
Yeah,
else.
of course. Yeah. Because you can send pages a lot easier.
But they had done that prior to COVID,
to it,
and it just worked out really well. Otherwise, if Matthew Roberts had been strictly like no pencils on 11 by 17 paper,
could take a lot longer.
I mean, you need a really high quality scanner, and it's a lot of Dropbox.
Yeah.
Which is how like people who do pencils and inks, physically still they use Dropbox. They send it back and forth, and it sounds truly terrible to me.
Yeah, but you've got to be almost faster as an artist that way to allow for that, that transfer, to allow time to build that in your schedule. So it's not easy, but yeah, that is a fortunate circumstance for them to make the switch when they did, given what was about to happen in the world there, to I guess allow them to finish the book in a way they were happy with. You know?
And
even though I'm sure at that point they knew they were coming to the end. They knew they didn't have another 12, 18 issues left of them. They knew they were coming to the end and wanting to get there. That change in art style, in going from pen and paper to digital, that change there probably allowed them, help facilitate them get to the end a little easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't know what our next book will be, but we do know next week's episode will be our interview with Matthew Roberts live at the Lexington Comic and Toy Convention. So it's going to be a little slower, or it's going to be a little lower audio quality than what you're used to, but still very listenable and very much worth hearing.
Yeah.
Matthew Roberts, super nice guy. And I guess if you're listening to this as it's coming out, be on the lookout. Final order cutoff for Corpse Night, his new book with Rico Renzi. Rico Renzi, a gentleman and a scholar who lent us an extra chair from his booth, so we could sit for the interview.
With Rico Renzi on color, the writer is filmmaker Matthew Shavs, who people may know from the Conjuring franchise that was started by James Wan. But yeah, that book's coming out. You're right. Matthew was great. You're right. We recorded at his table. Like we sat at his table in Artist Alley, and just chatted about the book, chatted about Manifest Destiny. He gave us some great insight about kind of the origins of the book, working with Chris Dingess, and kind of everything that went into getting this book, all the way to 48 issues, which is again a pretty crazy run in modern day comics. Anytime you can get to that for an independent book like that is awesome. Is awesome.
Yeah, I'm really curious if there's like an easy way to research this. I suspect not, but I will make an effort to know how many Image comics have gone over 40 issues.
Oh yeah, I mean you can probably find that. Well, I think there may not be many, but the ones that do are like over 70. Like the ones that go way past. So, but we don't need to do that live on the air, but no, it's not a lot because, it's hard to do that. And
by the way, you're right. I found it on Reddit. Someone talked about it, but
of course,
it's there's 15 to 20 total in the history of Image Comics.
Yeah.
And you're talking in there, Spawn 300 plus.
Walking
Dead 193.
Spawn,
144.
Savage Dragon. Yeah. So those are crazy,
And then, Saga currently at 60, but going up to
108. Allegedly.
Whatever it is. Chew 60. Yeah. So 45 is a pretty particular number there. East of West is the only other one that was 45 exactly.
All right.
As of the publication of this list.
It is still relatively rare, and I think it's a testament for the book because again, I don't think the sales were huge, but I think the people that read it were really into it, and so for them to get the runway for them to tell their story and finish it in a way that it didn't just stop, again, they had an idea of about how long they were going to go and how much time they had, and they were able to finish the story. And it's always great when creators are able to do that. And you'll hear Matthew talk about a little bit about that. We've listened to the interview next week, so really looking forward to that. And again, Matthew was so generous with his time, taking his time from away from actively working his table at a con to sit and talk to us two knuckleheads for a little bit.
Yeah. Awesome guy. Can't wait to see what he does next. Very excited to see Corpse Night, medieval horror. So
yeah,
more horror, but totally different time period and location than what we just read. So anyway, thank you for listening and reading along with us to Manifest Destiny. We will be back next week with an interview, and the week after that with an introduction to whatever series comes next. Thanks for listening.
Peace.